This is my thoughts as a convert to Catholicism regarding the traditional Latin Mass controversy. Quite some time ago, Pope Francis restricted the traditional Latin Mass because there were Catholics who dissent and condemn the Ecumenical Council of Vatican II, and these individuals used the TLM as a way to dissent from an ecumenical council and even the magisterium of the Church. I want to share with you what I noticed happen in my heart a while ago. You always hear of people having a dislike towards Christianity and Christians or religion in general due to them having bad experiences with Christians. For example, maybe there's a really hateful pastor or teacher or even just a stranger, and they exhibit really bad behavior while claiming to be a Christian. And as a result, the individual's heart generalizes this experience and he starts disliking Christianity and Christians as a whole due to bad representatives of this group. It might not necessarily be a dislike towards something, but it still creates a distorted view of the reality. This is obviously true for other things as well, for example, the police and even people's ethnicity. I caught this tendency starting to happen in my own heart regarding the TLM. The traditional Latin Mass is obviously good and holy, but many of its advocates, it is some of the most sinful and scandalous behavior I've ever seen. I'm not saying that everyone is guilty. There are obviously many good and faithful Catholics. But within the Church, there are so many people that are guilty of rash judgment and taking the most uncharitable interpretation of someone's words and actions. Of course, there can be legitimate criticisms and you can raise your opinion. But sometimes it feels like no matter what Pope Francis does or says, people are going to find a way to bash him over the head. People have this evil suspicion and assuming the absolute worst in other people and exhibit extremely irreverent behavior towards the hierarchy. Social media has made this so much worse. People are reactionary and eat up almost anything their favorite influencer has to say. People engage in a sense of slander, defamation, and scandalize the church in so many ways. Again, not everyone is guilty, don't get me wrong, and those who are guilty to different extents, so I'm not trying to paint everyone with a broad brush. But when I see the TLM having so many bad representatives, to say that the least, I caught my heart starting to have a distorted view towards the TLM. I don't want that to happen, and I'm glad that I was able to realize what was slowly forming in my heart very early on so I could stop it. But then a thought crossed my mind. If that was happening to me, it's safe to say that this will happen, is happening, and has happened to many other people as well. We are all human. I'm not going to be unique in this. When people exhibit bad behavior, it creates a stumbling block for other people. You guys know that I was an extreme anti-Catholic Protestant, but I'm telling you, there are Catholics who attack the church in ways I never did. There was a certain controversy about Pope Francis a few years ago, and I thought it was a good argument to undermine the Pope. So I asked a Catholic friend of mine at the time, and he sent me some articles explaining the whole situation. And then I was like, okay, yeah, this is a bad argument, I shouldn't use this. And I was still a Protestant at that time. Fast forward a couple of years, and there are countless people calling themselves Catholic who use the same controversy to attack and even reject Pope Francis. I am being vague on purpose by not naming the controversy because I don't want to risk the discussion going off topic. And let me just say this again. I am not saying that everyone who supports the traditional Latin Mass are bad representatives or bad Catholics. There are many good and faithful Catholics. And don't think, oh, you're just a liberal. I'm not a liberal. The issue is the radical so-called traditionalists. I say so-called because many of them dissent from church teaching. True traditional Catholics do not behave like this. Sadly, in their zeal for the TLM and even the Catholic Church they profess to believe in, they are giving it a really bad image and harming the very thing they claim to try and protect. For example, when people say that Vatican II taught heresy or that the Mass the Church has propagated is invalid and evil and leads people to hell and crazy things like this, then the gates of hell prevailed over the church. The church has failed to protect the souls of the faithful. I would never have become a Catholic because the church would be a failed institution. Many people leave Catholicism due to the attacks of these anti-Catholic Catholics. I am sympathetic towards Pope Francis for restricting the TLM. I understand where he is coming from because he correctly identifies the danger and threat these individuals pose. But was that the best decision Pope Francis could have made? I'm not personally convinced. It will definitely help protect the souls from the radicals to some extent, but is that worth it overall when normal and faithful Catholics face the consequences due to the disobedience of others? Because for me it feels like restricting the use of cars to some extent, due to there being some drunk drivers on the road, and then this restriction causes discomfort to people who are not drunk drivers. So could Pope Francis have disciplined the radicals in a different manner which would be more fruitful for the body of Christ? Possibly and probably yes. But any legitimate criticism I can offer the current pontificate, and they are legitimate criticisms, it is honestly outweighed by the sorrow and compassion I feel for him. Has there been another pope who is attacked and misrepresented as severely and consistently by lay people as Pope Francis has? When I look at the accusations people make about Pope Francis, specifically the major ones, and I actually examine these claims, my heart breaks that people could treat another person like this. Never mind the vicar of Christ. This video isn't about proving what I am saying in all of the details. This is just me sharing my thoughts and what I've seen happen. However, I think I will do a video in the future where I go through a list of accusations against Pope Francis in order to show how people misrepresent him, because it is important for me to demonstrate that my observations have facts and logic behind it. But getting back to the point of this video, many lay people set Pope Francis up for failure and accuse and attack him over all sorts of things. How on earth can a pontificate be a success, or even be average for that matter, when you have lay people like this trying to sabotage you every breath you take? The worst part for me is the fact that these people do it in the so-called name of tradition, when in reality they're just being unfaithful to the magisterium and they are sinning. As I said, you can advocate for the TLM and raise your opinion. No problem. The church is not a dictatorship. You are allowed to give your opinion and raise your concerns. But always ask yourself, the things I say, does it cause people to leave the church? When people look at me, will they see a godly person, someone who is charitable? Or do people see a person who slanders and just look for a way to criticize and berate the church? A person who assumes the worst in every word and action? A person who is reactionary and addicted to finding more ways to be angry? Do people see the virtue of obedience in me? If you are only obedient when you agree with someone or something, that doesn't mean much. That's easy. It's when you obey when something doesn't suit you, when you don't agree with something. That's when the virtue of obedience shines in its full glory. Do you use the proper channels and act responsibly when you give your opinion? Are you a good representative of the TLM, of Christianity, of Catholicism, of Jesus? Or do I cause people to have a distorted view about things that are actually good and holy due to my bad behavior? These are some things I want people to reflect upon. Thank you for watching. God bless.